Hi, I'm Corinne, and this is Free Press Fail here with John Barnett. We took a little break, had some family issues to work through, and John is so patient. Thank you so much. But we are back, and we have so much to talk about because the news has not stopped for the last 3 weeks, and there are so many conservative victories to discuss, a lot of Biden flops, and just looking at the trends on Twitter, we had too many to choose from today, so I'm just going to throw this one out there. January 6th committee, total bust. And I saw Lou Dobbs is trending, which I always love because Lou Dobbs is hilarious. And he was trending for a tweet that just said, the January 6th committee is full of the biggest liars I've ever seen. You can't believe anything that they have to say. And I think that's pretty directly true. Finally, the media picked up the January 6th committee a little this week and full of lies. Can't believe anything that was said. Even Trump had to comment on it. It was a pretty big story this week.
Totally. Even Megyn Kelly had to actually do a video and put it out on her platform stating that any, first-year law student would have a field day picking apart all of these, bogus testimonies. And the common phrase that was used throughout these testimonies was, well, something to the effect of. We don't need something to the effect of. We need to know what actually happened and what actually was said. So just like, Hollywood, which is all made up of scripts, right? And fictitious characters and stories, that's exactly what this was. It was a reality TV show that actually had a script. And they all followed the script and they made it up, but they did not answer, at least for me, one of the most essential questions. Why didn't Nancy Pelosi and the DC mayor activate the National Guard ahead of time, right? Because we all know from the January 6th hearings that he actually authorized the use of the National Guard. So this actually undermines their story. But you know what? There's a lot of silly, stupid people out there who actually got caught up. I don't think a lot, but a small percentage got caught up in all this drama. But I think it's going to backfire against the Democrats in the midterm elections.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And even this week, I feel like the testimony, Cassidy Hutchinson, she kind of grabbed the attention of a lot of like DC insiders and media elites who wanted to talk about this story because, it was very dramatic. She said that President Trump attacked a Secret Service man. He tried to grab the steering wheel. The biggest part of the story is that even in her own testimony, she says she wasn't there. This is a story that she heard someone else tell her. So if this were a real court of law, which it's not, they like to pretend that it is every once in a while, but it absolutely is not. It's complete hearsay. It's not even firsthand. She's not even saying I was there and I saw this happen. She's saying someone I know says they were there and they said that this happened.
Right.
And turns out they didn't even corroborate those stories. And those Secret Service agents are saying that did not happen. I'll testify under oath that I never told her that story. And no one on the committee even thought to verify that much. I think Megyn Kelly pointed that out, that like even a first year law student would know to put some pressure on this story and see if it stands up. And they didn't even do the bare minimum.
Absolutely. So when you combine the hearsay with something to the effect of, it's a flawed testimony.
Absolutely. And I think DC, to pull this card that the feminists maybe should be thinking about since they're ranting about a lot of things this week. This woman who testified, they made her famous for this testimony. She's 25 years old. She lied under oath to push this narrative. What did we just do to her career? They use this woman. She's young. She is a young woman who has a whole life ahead of her. And now she's Cassidy Hutchinson, the girl who lied about Trump grabbing the steering wheel. I think it's they coached her to say these things. They weren't thinking about her career, about her future at all. They just wanted her to push this narrative. And I think it's a little bit abusive of these members of Congress to just use a woman like this. And it's something that they do all the time. And I can't believe there's not more outrage over the way they just use women like this and make them disposable for their causes. But
I agree. I think they used her as political capital. But you know what? I don't suffer fools kindly. I think you have to be smart. And if you actually had values, you would never place yourself in a situation to be used as a pawn, right? So I don't sympathize with her at all. But I agree that they did abuse her, use her, and now she'll have to suffer from that decision to allow people to use her and to be willing to be used to make up lies. She has to, my father always said, if you make your bed hard, you have to lay in it, and that's what she has to do.
Yep, and I don't think it's a great path. I certainly don't envy it, and I think so many people got wrapped up in this hearing, like you said, um, where they convince themselves that they are fighting for democracy. They're righting some kind of wrong with a congressional hearing, which is laughable to me. Um, but they just got so caught up in this idea that they were doing something big and something major, and that it was worth it to push this story, even if it wasn't true, because the end meets, the ends justify the means. And I just don't think that's how history is going to look at this, becoming such a joke that even, like we said, even NBC News had to come out and say it's fake news. So I don't think they'll look too kindly on Cassidy. And I don't think anyone who's pretending to be her ally right now is going to stand with her when it's
Well, I don't think that even Democrats, a good portion of them, I don't think that they see this as anything beneficial to what they're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
I think it goes way beyond the testimonies. I think Adam Schiff, I think Nancy Pelosi, and the other Democrat clowns. I think this is going to backfire on them because it's obvious that the only reason why, well, there's two reasons. The only primary two reasons why they put the January 6th hearings on is to further, in their attempt to try to damage President Trump and discourage him from running again. But also these January 6th hearings, from the Democratic perspective, I think they tried to use it to take people's minds off the high gas prices, the baby formula hunger games, right? Because of the food shortages with baby formula and other food products and items and the prices thereof, and everything else that's going up in this inflationary market and the impending recession. So I think it's a colossal failure because it didn't accomplish those two things. In fact, it probably made Trump even stronger.
I think you're right. And I saw he did actually sat down with Newsmax this week and disputed this testimony himself. And actually it's become so funny that like he just had to come out and say, this is what was said. Really? Like, do you really think, like, I don't even have to tell you that's not true. Like, it's so clear. But I think you're right. It is such a distraction. And I think they thought it was going to work out for them. But especially people like Liz Cheney thought they were going to make this bipartisan coalition and it was going to benefit them. Liz is probably going to lose her primary in Wyoming. This week she's been begging Democrats to please vote for her so she doesn't lose in Wyoming, because she's abandoned her electorate over this particular issue. She really made this her thing, and it's a total bust. It's so embarrassing.
Well, first she abandoned her values, then she abandoned the electorate. One value is, pro-life. She's a pro-lifer. What has she said in the last 7 days?
Yep,
related to SCOTUS opinion on Roe versus Wade? She's silent.
Yeah, she's
too busy pushing the left's agenda.
Yeah, and she can't seem to juggle. Nancy Pelosi has been out there. Nancy Pelosi managed to have a statement on Roe v. Wade that was insane, and deal with January 6th committee. Liz Cheney has decided only to focus on January 6th. She hasn't come out, like you said nothing. She's silent on life. And that's, I think, she deserves exactly what she gets. She's abandoned her values. She's abandoned her voters. And in such a good time when there's so much to celebrate as a conservative, she is doing that. Like you said, a great few weeks since we've known this decision was coming for about a month now, for life. And I think Democrats hoped that it would inspire their base, that people would be so outraged that the focus could shift from the economy to this life issue. And I just don't see that happening. I think, we see the outrage, the people protesting on Supreme Court steps. We can expect that. I don't think in November people are going to say, it's $7 a gallon for gas, but what I really care about is killing my baby. I don't think that it's
But
gonna go.
you know, the thing is that a lot of Democrats did not know that abortion rights in certain states went all the way up to the water break, when the water breaks. And I think most people, 80% of Americans, do believe in abortion rights with restrictions. One of the restrictions is that, you know, they start feeling uncomfortable somewhere around the 5th and 6th month. So they would never vote and be in favor of terminating a pregnancy in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month. So it actually made Democrats, many people, aware of certain state laws. So I think this is going to backfire in a number of ways, where people will say, like, wait a second, all right, some people, they might say, I'm pro-choice, but wait a minute, not with no limits. We have to have some restrictions on that, because at some point, you know, from their perspective, it's a life. Yeah, so I think this is going to be in our favor.
I think so too, and I think that awareness is going to increase, because there are, you know, 5 months till election day, and the rhetoric is that this is the worst thing that's ever happened, that abortion is illegal, and that's actually not the case in several states. You know, sadly, I hate to bring this up, my home state has a constitutional protection for abortion. It does not matter. Roe v. Wade does not affect Nevada at all. You can have an abortion till 26 weeks, I think it is, in Nevada, constitutionally. And that was a people's referendum in the 90s that they passed, and it was that's codified in real law, not in judicial philosophy, which was pretty weak on Roe v. Wade, which is why they overturned it. And there are several states like that. You know, New York is not banning abortion anytime soon. In California, Colorado, Nevada, like I said, I think there are so many states where they have a pretty high population of pro-choice liberals who are flipping out right now. And they're about to find out they have no reason to be flipping out, that their abortion rights are completely protected, because all this did is turn it back to the states. And unless you were a liberal New Yorker that really wanted to seek a late-term abortion in Texas, nothing in your life has changed. It is not affecting you.
But you know, these woke corporations are now offering benefits to pay for travel expenses for women to have abortions, or should say their employees to have abortions. And these foolish Democrats don't even see that the reason why corporate America is behind it is because, you know what? It's technically less money to pay for an abortion than to give a woman 3 to 6 months off to care for a newborn baby.
Oh yeah.
So it's actually not their values, is actually cost effective for the corporations. Meanwhile, they're thinking that the corporations have their back. They really don't.
No, and I always wonder, you know, what's the follow-up? So if you pay for your employee to go to a pro-abortion state and have an abortion, what's your mental health coverage to deal with the trauma of that experience?
Right.
Are you following up on this? Do you really care about women's health? Because we know study after study shows that these are traumatic experiences for women. And even if you're not pro-life and you do believe in that right, I personally do not. But if you do, you cannot deny the emotional consequence of this procedure. And they treat it like, all right, so we'll send you to California. You have a good time. Airfare's on us. And I just don't think that that's going to be the case. It's a rude awakening for so many women, and then they're abandoned. They paid that your company paid for your abortion, and now you deal with it.
Exactly. And you know, there's stories about Planned Parenthood, some of them actually closing down. And I'm like, wait a second. I thought Planned Parenthood provided health care. So if it's health care, they should still be providing health care.
Yeah, it's really revealed what conservatives have been saying for so many years, and the disparity of these clinics are set up, like we have talked about before, they're set up in urban neighborhoods to target young Black mothers. They abort those babies at higher rates than anywhere else across the country. And then you see these statistics that Black mothers are dying in childbirth more. And I'm like, that's because you're not providing healthcare to these communities at all. You're providing abortions. And then we see these terrible statistics as if as we've not heard that they've been providing healthcare for years and years, and they haven't. They've just been providing abortion. That's why people are dying and they're not being well taken care of. We've dumped all this money into one thing specifically, and it has not benefited anybody at all.
Right. It's terrible.
It is terrible. I've also thought it was. I think, like you said, there's a large portion of Americans who do think that abortion should be legal in some capacity, but I don't think enough, because I've seen so many of the headlines about this ruling have had to tie abortion, like, well, now that abortion's done, that means gay rights and birth control and all of this stuff is up in the air. And I think that's because people are not afraid enough about abortion going to the sidelines, but they're like, wait, marriage, hang on, birth control, like all these things that are way more popular than abortion, they've had to tie it.
You know what I was asked last night? People are really nuts, right? I was asked last night, do you think that women's right to own private property will be taken away? And I looked at her, I'm like, are you nuts? Why are you giving in to this hysteria by the Democrats, thinking that your basic rights that's outlined in the Constitution will be taken away? Abortion rights are not in the Constitution. Your gun rights are. That's why it's upheld. So I think people are going down these tracks, and they're being led by fear, hysteria, and not common sense.
Yeah. And property rights, like you said, your right to property is in the U.S. Constitution, but property rights for women especially were codified in state constitutions since like the 1800s, since before we had these states, because it mattered to people to make sure that those rights existed. And I think a lot of drama is being made out of what Clarence Thomas wrote, which is he said that we should review these cases on gay marriage, on contraception, interracial marriage, and that is because they all hinged on this idea of a legal philosophy of substantiated due process, which is not in the Constitution. It's just a philosophy. It hinges on this idea that exists. That right is not guaranteed to you at all in the Constitution. So What he said is, we should review these because these cases deserve to be codified in law, not in philosophy. That those rights should be guaranteed by a law, not by a judicial ruling. And they're freaking out like, oh my God, Clarence Thomas thinks that we shouldn't have gay marriage or contraception or interracial marriage, which is hilarious because if that were true, Clarence Thomas just came up with the most creative way to file for divorce in history. Because he is married to
Honey, I gotta leave you because it's, this union is not constitutional.
Look, it's not me. It's not me. It's the legal. That was just weak legal standing. Okay, so that's on you. But it is just crazy. I think that that's actually out of respect for those rights. He's saying not that he doesn't think they should exist, but that they should not be so flimsy and they shouldn't hinge on something that is so unstable that it could be overturned. 50 years of precedent overturned in one swipe. If this actually had a law passed by the people, or a constitutional amendment at the state level or federal level, if they wanted. I don't really like those, but you could actually codify it on the federal level as well. Then you don't have to worry about these rulings. They're not so fragile. And for 50 years, liberals did not do that on the federal level, and they didn't do it in enough states apparently. So now they are freaking out that they have no legal standing here, which obviously, like I said, is not true. They do in some states. They did codify it in law, but they didn't make that a priority. I think they
took it for granted.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much more fun to play on the fear. If they had codified it in federal law, they wouldn't have been able to say every 2 years that Republicans were going to take away the right to abortion.
True.
And raise millions of dollars on the backs of scared people that they misled. So I think they did it on purpose.
I agree.
But the Supreme Court, it's just they released a bunch of rulings, like they usually do before they go on summer vacation. So they just filled up the docket. And they had big ones on religious liberty. They, said that you're allowed to pray if you are an employee of a school, which I can't believe that had to be discussed. But they ruled something that conservatives are mad about. The one ruling out of like 10 that wasn't a clear victory was the one that came out today or yesterday about the Remain in Mexico policy.
Mm.
And that's another thing, actually goes back to what Clarence Thomas was saying, is that you have to have a law. These things have to be passed. The Remain in Mexico policy was an executive order, and that can just be an executive order can always be undone by an executive order, which is what Biden did.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want the Remain in Mexico policy to exist, we have to pass it through Congress, and we have to have the president sign it so that it can't be undone so easily. But this ruling will affect it will affect America, because right now we've been saying, if you have a court proceedings and you're trying to immigrate to the United States, you stay in Mexico till those court proceedings are figured out. Because what has been happening was a response to, basically, those proceedings take too long and people just they lose track of immigrants. People overstay their visas, and then they can't track them anymore. And that's apparently the preference of the Biden administration. And then we're going to go back to that policy, which has been a proven failure for the last 50 years. But that is what's going to happen.
But we've known that for the last, at least 25 years, right? That our immigration system was broken, and our immigration system is like Swiss cheese. There's so many holes in it, right? That people can game the system. But nobody had the political will to pass a federal law to close the loopholes and to make it fair and balanced. Right, where in terms of the number of individuals that are in line, doesn't have an unfair advantage at the border versus those who are remote with regard to visas and things of that nature. So we need to use this as a situation. Obviously, Biden is not going to do it, but use this once we gain power, right? Starting in the midterm elections, then win the White House in 2024 and still maintain that power and address the immigration laws, the weak immigration laws, address the issues and the flaws, and finally pass something that protects our borders, not just from illegal immigration, but the drug flow, the sex trafficking, and all the other social ills. It is high time to step forward and do something about it.
I think you're right. And I think we get so caught up, people think that an open border policy is the most compassionate, but we saw these terrible, 53 immigrants died this week in the back of a truck in San Antonio, where it's like 110 degrees. You've got hundreds of people piled in the back of this truck. 53 of them, unfortunately, died. And that is because it's an exploitation of all of these people who want to come to America. They know the border is not secure, so these coyotes take all of this money from these people. They put them in these terrible conditions and abandon them. Apparently, they overheat in the back of this truck in 100-degree heat. How compassionate is that?
It's not.
And it's terrible. And I think it's weird, when 19 kids were victims of gun violence, we saw an immediate call for bipartisan legislation, and we should immediately react to this. But 53 people died in the back of this truck that 100% would not have happened if America had secure borders and clearly enforced policies, and these people would not become victims of crimes like this. And we don't hear any calls for legislation. We don't hear any outrage from the president.
It's a horrible death as well. Yes, 53 people died, but even how they died, they suffocated.
It is terrible. And too many people pass away making this journey, exploited by people who are willing to exploit the open borders of the United States. And it is terrible. But because it doesn't fit the agenda, we don't hear these calls for action immediately, even though these are actually more deadly. This is a bigger deal than COVID. This is a bigger deal than gun violence, but you don't hear the calls to action. And I think it is so sad and so disgusting that we have so many leaders who are willing to be silent on this issue because they're not sure how it's going to poll, or they're not sure that that's going to fall in line with their platform.
Right.
And I think it's sad, and it's such a disservice to both Americans and Mexicans who are losing their lives over this. And it's just terrible.
It is terrible, and many Hispanics are actually changing their voter registration to Republicans because of economic issues, immigration issues, and they see that the Democratic Party just lacks basic common sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I saw that numbers today, this week, 1 million new Republican voters. I think that Biden's approval ratings would suggest there's a large number of Hispanics willing to go the other way this time. I think his approval ratings are like less than 40% with Hispanic voters, historic low for a Democrat president. And I do think you're right. This is part of the reason why. And obviously a huge reason being the economy as well.
Right.
But immigration, the way he's handled the border, the way he's put lives at risk, I think is not going well for him. And like I said, he was so willing to jump it out and be at the forefront of so many issues and exploit casualties in certain ways, and not this week. He had nothing to say about this. Kamala just came out to say that the border is closed, so she doesn't know what people are upset about.
Kamala, the border czar.
Yeah, done an amazing job. But it must not have been
without going to the border, by the way.
Yeah, she's been to El Paso, and that's that.
Unbelievable.
But I guess they just didn't put it in Biden's notes to discuss this, so he couldn't, because as we saw with the note card leaking this week, Biden literally has notes that tell him, go sit, say hello, and what was it? And exit. Don't get lost, basically. He has commands like he's a dog. Sit, stay, speak. Don't get out of line.
Well, we all know that he's rolled over already.
Yeah, that was the other side of the note card for sure. I would find the whole thing so hilarious if it wasn't getting so sad, because we like to make fun of Biden for these obvious gaffes, but like, how far gone are you mentally that your staff has to prepare you to sit in your own seat and stay there? How often is it that he was supposed to stay in a chair and just ended up somewhere else? Like, why did they feel it was necessary to put those notes in?
It's really ridiculous. I mean, it should be obvious. I mean, if you're that forgetful, then you should not be president.
I think that you're totally right on that. Wanted to end on a little different note this week, because I was just thinking of, there's so much news, but like, what do we think is like the biggest neglected story of the week? And I was thinking the Epstein case. Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced, she was charged this week, right? With 20 years. She got 20 years for the sex trafficking, her role in the Epstein scandal. And still, we have no idea all of the people involved in her sex trafficking ring. And I always get so suspicious when the media is so quiet. How involved are they? Are they all in on it? How does this case is so groundbreaking that we know she is going to jail for providing young women, to countless people, and we don't know any of those names.
Yeah, this whole thing is unsettling, and they use the commotion over the last week to pass this verdict. But to your point, there's still a lot of questions. We want to see the list. We want to see the information. We don't want that information sealed. So I think this is going to be one of those mysteries. I don't know how we get the information. Even if you sue, I don't even know where the information is.
Yeah, you might not have even been asked to provide it, which I think is scary.
Right. So I think we need not be distracted. And this is the reason why we need journalists.
Yeah.
If this was 20, 30, well, not even 20, 30 years ago, those journalists would have actually gotten the information.
Yeah. I think what's crazy is the media loves to throw out, the conspiracy theorist and the right-wing conspiracy. I'm like, this is how conspiracy grows, because this
Yes.
is a huge thing. We are being kept in the dark. You are not telling us who. Is it that those questions were never asked? Is it that she made some kind of deal so that those names stayed private? Are there people at the top level like involved in this to keep it quiet? Why is it quiet?
What?
That is how conspiracy breeds.
Why give her a deal?
Yeah. It's
to keep names quiet. That's wrong on face value.
Yeah.
We want to know who these people are, how long they've been doing it, how many lives have they destroyed and impacted adversely, I should say. We need to know.
Yeah, and I think that we will see some actual journalism pop up because of this, because there's such curiosity here, and I think people are going to put in the work. But like I said, when you've got every mainstream outlet shutting it down, I think it's often dismissed as conspiracy.
Well, maybe that's another reason for the January 6th trials. Hearings, right? Because to take their minds, America's minds, off of cases that will likely be settled.
Yeah. Well, I am interested.
Resolved, I should say.
I want to see like a Project Veritas, deep dive, real journalism. And I will definitely be digging myself. Free Press Veil exclusive, because I want to know who's involved in this and who's covering it up and why. And we know it goes deep enough that, we've got princes, the Prince of England, is involved in it, and former presidents. I mean, how far does this go? Is it Supreme Court justices, appellate justices? How far?
Well, I don't want to start any conspiracies, right? But I guarantee you, once they start digging, they will probably also realize how many people suddenly died,
yes,
or disappeared, or committed suicide, right? That were part of the sex ring, or knew about or helped facilitate it.
I think you're right. And that is going to be a really, I bet we can dedicate a couple podcasts to that once this stuff starts coming. It'll just never stop. But
exactly.
But I'm always suspicious when the media is collectively quiet on something. True. Because we have so many different networks and they all have competing interests. You'd think at least one would go really hard on this and give the people what they want, which is the truth. And right. I think Newsmax has covered it a bit. I would say they've covered it the most of anyone I have seen. But overall, really surface level investigation of this. There is not a lot of chatter, and I think that is suspicious.
In fact, we shouldn't call it an investigation, because an investigation digs deep. Mm-hmm. This is surface.
I think you're right, but I'm definitely going to be doing some of my own investigating, so I'll keep you updated. And I'm looking for all the conservative, real journalists that are left out there. I'm hoping they shine some light on this.
Go get them.
Yeah. But that is all I had for this week, and I guess we'll be back next week. I'm not quitting on you anytime soon. So make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Cool. See you next week, folks.